cast iron Dutch oven. I'm going to use the hardwood charcoal on the bottom, and I'm going to use briquettes on the top. Now the initial goal here is just to get the iron good and hot. So while the pot's warming up, I'm going to start the briquettes for the top of it. Basically, we're just going to start out with, oh, by the way, nothing but olive oil goes in here for cooking. We've got it nice and warm. Next we're going to throw in the onions. Took the liberty of cutting up beforehand because, you know how to do that kind of stuff. Okay. And then I've got some scarlet cloves here, about a dozen or so. Just going to go right in there. And we're just going to brown them up just a little bit. And I'll show you the sacrifice for today's meal in just a couple of minutes here. So just let them brown up. The coals are going for the lid. Shaky, shaky. Alright, that right there is the sacrifice for today's meal. A nice, well, we'll call that a 3-pound chuck roast, but it's got some good marbling in there. And by the time this thing is done, it'll be fall apart tender. Okay, back to the onions. To this we're going to add a little bit of fresh sea salt. Season them up just like you were going to use them for anything else. Might seem like a lot, but by the time you see everything that goes in here, it's not all that much. A little medium ground pepper, I think. Yeah. She's but grinding, but not all that much. Must have got wet out here. And then a little bit of my secret seasoning, which I won't tell you what it is, but adds an awful lot to the flavor. That's how you know when the pan's hot. Nice sizzle to it. Okay, for the moment we're not being really particular about the heat other than want it hot. The vegetables are in there, sauteing really nice, and they're starting to brown up in there. Maybe I'll show you that just a little. Okay, just a little bit of the browning sizzled on the edges. That's all we're looking for. Okay, and what we're going to do now is we're going to take our piece of meat and we're going to dump it right in there where the veggies aren't sitting and sear it a little bit. Oh yeah, we're good and hot. Just like that, right alongside. We want to sear it a little bit because we're adding flavor. Not burning anything, just adding flavor. We're going to let it go for a couple of minutes on each side. And we'll be ready for the next step. Okay, let's check and see if the first side has a little bit of a sear to it yet. Oh, just a little bit more. And the whole piece of meat isn't hot, so you don't have to worry about using any kind of utensils. You can just use your gloves, like I got on at the moment. And this is going to be your standard pot roast like you would cook on a Sunday morning if you were Grandpa and Grandma. Okay, we've got about the level of sear that I was looking for on this thing. So I'll go ahead and scoop it over a little bit, and I'm going to put the majority of the veggies right on top of this roast. And then what we're going to do is add about half a container of beef broth. Now as you can see, that fire is pretty hot. So what I'm going to want to do after I get the lid on here, I'm going to put the lid on this, and then I'm going to adjust my grate, which in this case is the whole pan, down. Well, I can tell by the sound of it that it's a little hotter than I thought it ought to be. Yeah, just a little bit more in the slow simmer. Pardon the switching around of the camera there, but doggone stuff falling on the roof sometimes sounds like sound grenades to me. So I'm going to go ahead and put a little just plain old water in here to replace the fluids that have lost. I've already gone ahead and lowered the fire, and as soon as this thing starts to get tenderized, then we'll go ahead and put some potatoes in there. This usually takes about an hour and a half or so, depending on how tender you like your meat. Okay, I think it's been about 45 minutes. Let's check this thing. Oh yeah, we got a little bit more than a slow simmer going on there, but I think it's going to serve its purpose okay. Yeah, it's going to be a little while before this guy is done. Okay, been about another half hour or so. I'll show you what she looks like before we do the next step. And as you can see, I started to reduce down the broth, and the fork is just going right through there. And that's not quite as tender as it's going to get yet. Got one more step I'm going to do. Normally I'd have carrots and all kinds of stuff to put in there, but today it's going to be just potatoes that I'm dumping in there. And we're going to let this go about another half hour. And come out and check, and we're going to cook it until the potatoes are good and tender. And by that time the meat will be super tender and we'll be ready to eat. Okay, I think I've indicated a couple of times, a couple of different cooking times. Cooking times are going to vary depending on your heat and what you've got in there. But I think you can see that meat is just fall apart. The vegetables are tender. You still have a little bit of liquid left down in there if you should choose to make gravy to put on your roast. Everybody has their own taste that way. There's one thing I can guarantee you, is that if you cook over hardwood charcoal and take time to do it with the cast iron, anything kind of like what I've showed you, you are not going to be disappointed with what the end product is. Okay, and for those of you who are wondering about, well, how tender is super tender? Fork, roast, how's that, huh? You don't even need teeth to eat this roast.